Tell Us About Yourself is sponsored by bonusround.ca, streaming Canada's classic game shows on demand. Dive into the golden age of television with thousands of episodes of Canadian series that defined an era from anywhere in the world, all for just $1.99 a month. From iconic shows like Let's Make a Deal and Definition to cult classics like Bumper Stumpers and The Mad Dash, bonusround.ca brings you timeless entertainment that's fun, enlightening, and affordable. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, relive the magic of Canadian television history. Subscribe now at bonusround.ca for $1.99 and turn every night into Game Show Night. By Game Show Forensics. Join host Robert McKee and his crack team of forensic game show scientists as they take you on the deepest dives imaginable in a quest to analyze the most detailed minutiae of game shows nobody else dares to, or cares to, investigate. Nothing is too whimsical for examination, no semantics too absurd for the research extremists at GameShowForensics.com. Parental discretion is advised. And by The Inn at Leola Village. Nestled in the heart of picturesque Pennsylvania, the Inn at Leola Village is a sanctuary of luxury and relaxation. Indulge in the timeless beauty of their historic suites, each meticulously designed to transport you to a bygone era of elegance and grace. Experience the culinary delights of their award-winning Italian restaurant, where every dish is a masterpiece crafted from the finest local ingredients. From romantic getaways to corporate retreats, the Inn at Leola Village offers a haven for every occasion. Unwind at the spa, stroll through the lush gardens, and let the stress of everyday life melt away. Make your reservation today at theinnatleolavillage.com or call the front desk at area code 717-656-7002. The Inn at Leola Village, an oasis of luxury. Tell Us About Yourself. Conversations with Game Show Contestants is produced in partnership with the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, one of the largest history museums in the United States, and one of the leading museums serving families with highly interactive exhibits and programs. Since 1968, the Strong Museum has been dedicated to exploring the ways in which play encourages learning, creativity, and discovery, and how it illuminates cultural history. And their National Archives of Game Show History. Founded by industry veterans Bob Bowden and Howard Blumenthal, the archive is home to thousands of artifacts representing over 80 years of broadcasting, including props, set designs, video interviews with game show professionals, and other iconic elements from the history of television at play. For more information about the National Archives of Game Show History or the Strong National Museum of Play, visit museumofplay.org or call area code 585-263-2700.
Blue 35.
We've met before, but let's meet again. Tell us about yourself.
What else can you tell us about yourself?
Perhaps you'd fill us in again and tell us about yourself.
My name is Jeremy Nelson. I am from Chicago, Illinois, and I am a social media data analyst.
So before we talk about anything else, massive thanks are in order because I did an episode of this podcast last week that I am incredibly proud of. I'm still coming off of the high of having released it and edited it and having it go well. For anyone who isn't aware, you were the connection between me and John Hatton, who was on Blockbusters back in the early 80s, won $120,000. His house burned down, the whole thing. Everyone heard the story. But you were the bridge between me and him. So thank you for helping to make that happen.
Oh, you are so welcome. I think we talked a little bit at the end of our last episode about how important this project, this podcast really is, because there are a lot of there are a lot of contestants who really do want to tell their stories and who've told them at dinner parties and at family functions over the years. And, they stay within those small circles. But for the sake of preserving this media, a still fairly young media, the more of these people we can find who have these fantastic stories like John, the better.
Well, and right, you said that in the last episode, and I've had people tell me that, it's important that we're doing this. It's important to preserve these stories. And no offense to anyone else who's been on this show, but if it wasn't one of the first times, it was the first time that I truly felt like, holy shit, we're preserving something here. Because when I talked to him, I asked him, when was the last time he told this story? And he said, who would I tell the story to? I've never told this story. And it just blew my mind. I mean, you think about, and I mentioned it to him, but you think about the context of game shows these days, how so many game shows focus on the personal circumstances of the contestant, right? You can't get on the wall unless you saved a burning bus of infants from a 9/11. You know what I mean? Like, you can't get on that show if you don't do something insane. You look at like Press Your Luck these days and how it's always about, these personalized prizes and how they fit into the life of the contestant. I mean, think about his story. Like, if Ken Jennings had won 6 games and his house burned down and he won another 14, he would be more of a household name than he is now. And it just blew my mind, and it really made me feel like, yeah, there are stories out there that have not been told. So yeah, just thank you so much. What inspired you, or what was the catalyst for finding out where he was and if he was alive and his phone number and all that info? Like, how and why?
Yeah, so it really started on a whim. So for years, for the people who may not know, the John Hatton episodes of Blockbusters have been run on GSN in some way, shape, or capacity since they got the episodes, probably what would have been 20, 25 years ago. But on YouTube, there's only a smattering of those episodes. And so looking back, I could only piece together 5 or 6 of the episodes because I wanted to do a project similar to the one that one of the online fans did with Ken when he was on Jeopardy back in the day, and calculated all of his stats and did some comparisons to some other great Jeopardy champions. I said, well, John is one of those super champions that we really never hear about. Like, even Tom McKee got a lot of publicity back in the day for what he did on Tic-Tac-Toe, and maybe a couple of those other champions. But John, with the circumstances, I mean, that kind of story nowadays, to your point, he'd be on the morning talk show circuit in no time if he won 6 games, his house burned down, won another 14 in 2024. And so when I started piecing together his episodes, there's now a compilation. So thank you to the YouTube user out there who actually posted his entire run in order as one video. It's like a 7-hour video. And so I literally started going through and calculating, here's how many he got of this letter, here's how many he got in this game, this, that, and the other. And then it started making me wonder, where is this man? Because he was also a licensed psychologist. So he has to have had some sort of paper trail somewhere, right? He has to have a published paper. He has to have, there have to be some news clippings or something. And then you realize that he was, roughly 40 back when he was on the show. So this is not somebody who's really got a huge online presence to begin with. So I started looking around, and I think we started having a conversation about it too. Like, what age would he be if he were still alive to this day? And it got me to thinking, at least, if he's in his 80s or his 90s, he's got to be, statistically near the end of his life. And let's maybe try one more time to find him, because I know I'd searched for his name on several occasions and nothing came up. Then when I started watching the episodes, I noticed that on both occasions he says the names of his kids. And I figured, okay, well, his kids might have some sort of online presence, and not to do it in a creepy way, but just type in the names of his kids as one. And all of a sudden I got a hit. I got a hit on his son, and then some other things started popping up, and then we got one of those white pages things. If you've ever searched for yourself, and they say here are the people you're most closely associated with, um, his name and his number came up, and then I did a cross reference because on the episode where they invite him back to play after his first 10 wins, they do an at-home interview, and so they do this interview with him, which is really very not in line with what a game show would have done in 1980, but they do an interview with him before they re-enter him into the game, where he's standing in front of the house that had burned down that they were in the process of rebuilding. And on his listing, there's an address, and lo and behold, it is also the same address. When you do like a Google Maps search, there's also an address where there's a picture of where he is, and it totally matched up. And I said, well, if that adds up, then maybe the phone number does. And that's really how it came about. It's just a testament to how both amazing and scary how the internet can connect and reconnect us all, really, at the end of the day.
Oh yeah.
But so happy that we found him, because I mean, as like I said before, as an 85-year-old man, that story, any given day, and not to say he won't live to be 100, but any given day, that story is then lost to the ether, and we don't get that. So I'm just really happy that everything, the stars aligned in the way that they were supposed to.
Oh, for sure. And you passed me the phone number, and I was at work, and I got the message, and I saw that you had sent a picture with text, and I said, holy shit, this isn't a screenshot with this phone number. And I opened it up, and it was. So right away, mm-hmm. I was working at the hotel. I went out back to the patio, and I called, and I left a message. I still wasn't sure if it was him, and I said, this is, my name is Christian Carrion. I hope I have the right John Hatton. I'm calling I do a podcast with the National Archives of Game Show History. I'm hoping this was the John Hatton that was on a show called Blockbusters 40 whatever years ago. If you are, I don't know if you're interested in talking to me or telling me your story, but there are more people than you know that are fascinated with what you were able to do on that show. And he called me back, and that was it. And he was thrilled to hear from me. He was thrilled to hear that people still remembered it, and he was tickled that somebody had taken all of his episodes and stitched them together into like a 7-hour chunk and put them on YouTube. Yeah, it was just incredible. And then just being able to interview him and hear his story, I mean, I was almost in tears during the interview. I felt like we had grabbed hold of like a wisp of smoke. It's like, I need to preserve this. Like, please don't interrupt him. Don't throw him off. Like, it's all coming back to him.
When that man started talking about that fire, I nearly lost it. I mean, when he nearly broke, and remembering the story, I mean, I think that's the other proof that he's never really told that to anybody, because for those emotions to come back just as intensely as they almost did for him, I mean, that's something that he didn't necessarily tuck away, but outside of his family, yeah, he probably didn't tell anybody about, recount the story to anybody else.
Sure. It makes it more real. Before you get that third dimension, it's a thing that happened on a game show rerun, and we can sympathize with it to the degree that we can sympathize with an old game show rerun, but you don't have that personal connection to it as much as they tried to establish that on the show. Hearing him recount all these memories, and the fact that they're so vivid enough to make him emotional almost half a century later. Oh my God.
It's, again, a testament to the number of stories that really are out there that we don't know. Makes me a little sad to think that there are stories that have been, lost to time, lost to life. People take those stories with them to the grave, but
sure,
it's also exciting to think that there's so many more of those out there, right?
Yeah.
There's, thousands of game show contestants out there who've come on the show, from different backgrounds, different circumstances. And And how many of them are probably tickled pink to talk about their experience outside of, their close group of friends who knew that they were on Face the Music in 1981, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I say that on a bunch of episodes that no matter whether they won or lost, like I've talked to people, I've talked to $1 million winners on Millionaire. I talked to the guy who answered a $2.2 million question wrong. It's been at both ends of the spectrum. And the one commonality is that it's always fun to talk to. It's always fun to talk about, rather. It's always a fun story to recount.
Yes.
You and I, Jeremy, are game show fans, aficionados, whatever the upper echelon, I think, of that scale is. We know a lot about this stuff. Knowing what we know about game shows, about television, about broadcasting in the early 80s, looking back, why didn't that story receive more coverage than it did?
I don't think the story got as much coverage as it did because there were so many people that were affected by that fire. He was John was one house of more than 200 that was affected by that fire. So when news stories are talking about this fire and the families who've lost their livelihoods, their homes, they're talking about it as a collective in 1980. One man can't rise above the ashes of that story to become the face of that story because it's such a somber thing to begin with. I think our general curiosity about people has changed over the years too. I think that there's something to people wanting to be on TV a little bit more nowadays. People more open about telling their stories. Even when John was talking about the fire, to Bill on the show, he's so matter-of-factly and so straightforward in how he talks about how they dealt with the fire, how he told his kids that, we're not quitters. We keep moving in life, even if bad things happen. And so he also just doesn't strike me as a person who, even if the Today Show did call, would have been tickled pink to go on the show and talk about his experience with the fire or with the show. I think that just wasn't his demeanor.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. It's easy, I think, to forget in the scope of through the lens with which we know that story. I think it's easy to forget that there were so many people that were affected by that firestorm back then.
Absolutely.
Because he did mention it was like 225 homes or something like that. That's a lot of people. So I guess that is a fair point. And maybe I was thinking of it more in terms of like the show, I guess, was not very popular. I mean, it only lasted a year, 2 years at the most. And so I wondered if maybe because it was an obscure show, there really wasn't much of a frame of reference, with which you could report that story. But I think a more salient point is that idea that it was just such a catastrophic event for so many people, not just the guy that was on Blockbusters.
Now you do have me thinking, though, if he was on a more popular show, like if he was on what would have been more popular in 1980 that he would have been on for multiple days, like Tic-Tac-Toe.
Well, Tic-Tac-Toe, I think that would probably be the best example.
Yeah, that's the comp. If he were on Tic-Tac-Toe in 1980 and that happened where he won 6, the fire happened, he won 14, 20, 25, whatever the number would be. Maybe there is more play, but I also, to wrap that up, yeah, I still do think that there's something to the way John's very straightforward demeanor. I think that there's something to that as well. So while he might have done it to create more awareness around fire safety or just, whatever the case is, I don't see him taking a bunch of interviews, even if the show is more popular. But, who knows? Who knows? I'm glad that we got what we got.
Oh, for sure. Very grateful for it. And thank you again.
Of course.
Let's talk about game shows.
Let.
It's been Why not? We're here. Why not? It's been a little over a year since we last talked.
Yeah.
Have you auditioned for anything in that year or so?
I actually auditioned for Wheel of Fortune. I did not feel like I did very well during the Zoom interview. but who knows? I mean, I may still get a call. Who knows? I've actually been really focused on work in the past year, and I really haven't had the chance to try out for too much. And I know right now, I feel like Jeopardy in general has elevated its material in a way where I need to hunker down at some point and really get better at trivia and knowing things in a way that I think the game wasn't as challenging a decade ago. I think with between Masters and the invitational tournaments and everything that they're doing, even Celebrity Jeopardy, if you've noticed, took a decent step up in difficulty once Ken and Mayim took over. So I think while I'd love to be on Jeopardy, while I'd love to try out again for the show as I do every year and take the anytime test, and if you haven't taken the anytime test, take the anytime test.
Take the anytime test, yes.
Who knows? But I know for sure my skill set needs to I need to get more reps in to be prepared for Jeopardy at this point. I think it's a much more challenging show now than it was.
I have always wondered if the degree of difficulty on Jeopardy coincides with the show's popularity. I seem to remember, and maybe this is me. I don't know if I remember this or I'm making this up in my head, but it seemed to me that when the show was super popular, when they have a champion that's on for however many days, when they had James, when they had other people who have been on for, however many days, and the show is getting more viewers and people are slowly tuning in more often to see if this guy loses or if this guy wins, I feel like the material is easier. And I wonder, and again, there is no solid credibility to this. This is a complete conjecture. But it seems to me that if they have more people watching the show, they want it to be more accessible, and so they do decrease the difficulty a bit so that more people can follow along and tune in tomorrow and saying, "Oh, this shit is hard," and turn it off and not watch it again. Whereas whereas now that the honeymoon period with Ken and Mayim is over, he's sort of settled into the role. They're not turning it up a little bit because the people that are sticking with the show are sticking with the show.
That's a good point too. I think with the advent, and maybe it's because I don't get a chance to watch daily like I used to, so a lot of Jeopardy that I end up watching ends up being the tougher Jeopardy. So like I end up watching Jeopardy Masters because I have Hulu and so I can watch it the next day. And so maybe my gauge of the material, because the episodes I'm watching are leaning more in the very difficult degree of category. Maybe that's where my bias comes from, because to be very fair, yeah, I don't think that I've been able to watch like regular season Jeopardy in a while. And that's partly on the show too, and the writer's strike and all of that as well. But yeah, I think there may be something to your point. I just haven't seen enough Jeopardy to be able to say that's right or wrong.
I haven't either. If I want to be honest with you, I haven't watched many game shows daily in a really long time.
Are we just getting like, no, I don't want to say are we getting old, but not in terms of like us getting old, but is it just a function of, okay, we're adults now, we have things that have to take priority over daily watching? I don't know.
I have asked myself that question almost every day over the past 2 years or so, because game shows are not as much as I love them, and as much as we all love them, they are not something that I go to on the daily. I've been watching a lot of old talk shows. I've been watching a lot of old news coverage. I've been fascinated lately with that idea of like communication. There's different styles that people employed back in the day in terms of communication. Now I feel like it's a very homogenous kind of product. Everybody went to the same hosting school. Everyone dresses like Ryan Seacrest. Everybody talks like Ryan Seacrest. Everybody does the hand thing where they're talking and gesture into the camera. Like everybody does that. But I feel like back then there were so many different talents, and I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm doing this podcast, but I crave those bits of insight into like how other people talk to other people on camera. That it's an art form, and it's something that on game shows you get to a certain degree, but there's always something else at hand. It's always time to stop talking and play the game. So I don't know. That's where I've been lately with like the stuff I've been watching.
I think there's a what's the right word I'm looking for here? I think there's some validity to your point, in that I think, yeah, game shows have gotten, in some cases, a little bit homogenous in terms of hosting. And when you really think about game shows in, 1981, everybody's got a little bit of a different personality. Alan Button is more of the scholarly type, and Dick Clark is your headmaster, and you have Jim Perry, who is the Guy Smiley of game show hosts. Everybody's a little bit different. So when you're tuning in, you're not just getting a different show, you're also getting a different personality leading that show in a different way. Even the blockbusters, I love Bill Cullen, but on a show like Blockbusters, I'm fast forwarding through some of the things, because there are some segments where they only get through 3 or 4 questions because there's so many asides, because that's how Bill hosts. If that game is hosted by, I don't know, if that game is hosted by Dick Clark, if that game is hosted by even Tom Kennedy, I think that's a game that has a different pace, a different feel, a different vibe. And nowadays, I think, as we're talking about why we don't watch as much, I think there's less. I think that shows have become so rote that it's hard to watch for anything exciting. Like, what exciting is going to happen today? Like for Jeopardy, you may get a 7 or 8 game streaker, but outside of that, it's Jeopardy and it's good. It's just very sameish and it's every day, and there's not really anything there's not really anything exciting that's going to make you watch outside of there being a good game that day. Same with Wheel of Fortune. The rules have been the same for years, and they haven't really done much to tinker with the shows. There's less tinkering that happens nowadays with shows too, where they're not adding that element that's going to bring more people in to watch the show. I mean, think about how different an episode of Wheel of Fortune is now. I mean, pre Ryan taking over, but versus an episode 7 years ago. They're almost interchangeable. There are no returning champions. The set looks almost entirely the same. If you didn't know what the minimum amount is in the bonus round, you could switch. They could be running episodes of Wheel of Fortune from 6 years ago, and outside of the most attentive people in our fandom, is the American public really going to notice?
Right.
And I think
they don't. Yeah, they don't notice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. GSN is running episodes from Wheel of Fortune from 5 or 6 years ago. And again, if you didn't know that the bonus round, minimum coincided with the season that they're in, why would you even think that it's a rerun? You could just play it for grandma. She thinks it's new. So I think Family Feud the same way. I mean, there's going to be a level of, hey, we're going to do the racy question for Steve so we can get the big reaction. I feel like there's less done on some of these shows to tinker with and help the show feel fresh. And maybe it's because those shows are at the top of syndication, and so they don't feel like they need to do much to keep an audience. But as somebody who's watched these shows for years and seen them try different things and then take different things out, I'd like to see them tinker with things a little bit more just to make it fun.
Oh, for sure. And I think Wheel of Fortune is a great example of that. I don't remember who it was that I talked to about this, but we were talking about the difference between Wheel of Fortune back in the 80s and 90s versus Wheel of Fortune now. And I'll say it the way I said it back then. Again, I don't remember who I was talking to, but I said, it's no disrespect at all to the people who make these shows, because it is difficult to make TV. It is difficult, it's stressful, it's tedious, all that. But there seemed to have, how do I describe it? Oh, you know how I described it back then? It's like cookies. There's a homemade cookie, right? Where the dough is like a little uneven. You could tell somebody used their hand to like shape it. Maybe not as much raisins in this one as there is in another one, but you can tell it was like made by human hands. You could tell that some love and a little bit of trial and error and a little bit of fun and a little bit of human care went into making it. Whereas today, Wheel of Fortune is like Mrs. Fields cookie. They all kind of come from the same factory. They are all uniform shaped. They all have 1.5 ounces of raisins, and they are an interchangeable product between each other. Not that one is inherently better than the other. That's a matter of preference, I guess. But maybe it's just that, I mean, audiences, I guess, really just don't give a shit. You know what I
Well,
mean? We pick up on the details that they don't.
that is true. And let's be honest, the homemade cookie is always better. I
Oh,
don't care. Mrs. Fields can make a damn good cookie, I'm sure. I have not had one in 6 years, but if you told me that you made a homemade cookie and it didn't have raisins in it, I'd eat it.
I was trying to be diplomatic, Mrs. Fields.
Sorry, Mrs. Fields, if you're out there and
Yeah,
you've been on you've been on Hollywood Squares. Call Christian.
that's right. That's right.
But one of the things that I think I'm looking most forward to, there was an interview that Ryan gave to ABC's entertainment show. They're kind of like Byron Allen, Entertainment Tonight kind of thing.
Right.
He was given an interview and he said one of the biggest challenges of hosting Wheel of Fortune for him is the idea that everything can be cut. Because if you think about it, he comes from a live TV background. Every show that he's done has been live at some point. Live with Kelly and Ryan, The Morning Radio, American Idol. Most of his big projects, you have to New Year's Rockin' Eve. You have to move with the time.
Yeah.
You can't go back and say, cut, we got to reshoot this, hold, please. No, you make a mistake, you got to keep going. And I think I'm looking forward to Ryan bringing a little bit more of a human side to Wheel of Fortune, because I feel like he's going to be the person who's going to encourage the mistakes to be made.
Right. I never thought of that.
Encourage the show to be not as machine learned.
Right.
And that, hey, we can make a mistake and make something good out of this. And I think that's going to be the other thing. He's going to be the person that can make gold out of mistakes because he's been making gold out of mistakes for 20 years now.
Sure,
so
live TV energy.
Yes. So I'm looking forward to Wheel of Fortune feeling more like we can make these mistakes and keep moving, and it's a fun show. And we made 8,500 of these. They're not all going to be perfect, but we're going to get some really good stuff out of some of these just by letting the camera roll. And I really hope that Bellamy, the producer, allows him to do that, so that that's his strong suit. And I hope that doesn't get taken away from him just because they have the ability to cut and retape. That's what I'm hoping.
Right. I hope so too. I never thought of it from that perspective. Like, of course, he has that ability to host a show without edits. And yeah, maybe we'll bring some new energy to it. I think that going back to what we were talking about regarding the differences between like Wheel of Fortune back then and now, streaming did a lot for that, because I think that it behooves producers these days to make shows that can be aired in non-sequential order.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, well, yeah, I just think that on streaming, you can put shows on in any order and it'll make sense. And I think that it highlights something about game shows that as a fandom we sort of romanticize. We look at these shows as art to a certain degree. We look at the staging, we look at the music, we look at the game, the presentation, and it's art to us. They are products like anything else. And so if it behooves them to make these products in a way that serves the business, helps the bottom line, and allows them to be aired anywhere, at any time, in any order, like, of course they're going to do it that way. And I feel like a lot of, and I'm guilty of it as well. I get hung up on what I consider to be the beauty of that type of TV, but it is a consumer product at the end of the day.
I agree with you on that. I think that there's a happy medium somewhere that we could still get to. Is there something, let me put it to you this way. Is there something that you ate as a kid that you loved, that you had again within the last 3 years, and you said, that is definitely not like the Pop-Tart I remember or the Chips Ahoy cookie I remember? Like
Zebra cakes.
There you go.
Zebra cakes, all that little Debbie shit. Zebra cakes, Swiss rolls, none of it tastes the same.
Absolutely. And I think that, there was a point where these things were being made in factories with fairly fresh ingredients where, hey, I'm sure that there was a point where a Twinkie or a Zebra cake had a short shelf life, and then they decided, all right, let's pump some preservatives in this thing because we need for it to be on a 7-Eleven shelf for, 4 months if we need it to be. And I think that's kind of what's happened with television is, they pumped it full of preservatives so that way it can still be rerun on Netflix, or hey, we're going to run this on, we're going to run this in prime time, but we're also doing this side series for XYZ. There are more preservatives built into the show, in that, to your point, the shows are very put together, very machined. And, hey, sometimes you have to do that to make sure that you're putting out a consistent, good product. And, Lord knows that nowadays, with all the analytics that we have and all the data we have at our fingertips, more and more of these things, whether it's art, whether it's television, whether it's food, a lot more of that stuff is being analyzed to get it to max consumption. But you're right, it's art. And it's not just art in that we see it as art. All the things you mentioned are actually art forms that have to go into making the show itself. The set is developed by an art director. The theme music is directed by an Ed Kelhoff, or, a musician, actual musician.
Yeah, composer, right.
A writer is writing these questions. Somebody on Scrabble is coming up with all of these crazy puns in order to make the show feel funny and to throw Chuck off of his game. It is television, and game shows in particular are actually made by artists, if you really think about it. It's a whole art consortium, whatever you want to call it, but everybody on that show is doing art.
Yeah. No, and you are absolutely right. And I think that aspect of the process gets overlooked in the general appraisal of game shows as they relate to popular culture. Other types of TV don't get that. The Sopranos is a consumer product with merchandising and commercial time, but it is looked at as art because all of those things come together and create a product that can be viewed as art. For whatever reason, game shows escape that type of analysis to the general public. People don't look at game shows in that same way.
One thing that's always confused me is, even in the books the books about game shows that were written back in the 80s, I remember back then they were talking about how game shows had always been sort of the downtrodden art form. Or rather, not even an art form, just a downtrodden, just kind of the trash TV of its day before we got to the Jerry Springers.
Right.
Just sort of the lowbrow. Nobody really wants to host these. They're cheesy. They're colorful. It always sort of confused me as to why game shows were always looked down upon as this form of television that this is the lowest of the low. If you're hosting a game show, you're in the bottom of your career swing, or we're going to throw these things on in daytime because they're easily, we can easily throw these away. But everybody watches them. People remember the theme music. People still know what people mean when they say no whammies. People still watch Wheel of Fortune with their families. So it's so interesting in that there's a lot of people out there that look at game shows as this sort of, we can kind of step on this thing over here, but
right, disposable. Yeah.
Like, yeah, nobody, everybody knows that McDonald's is not the burger that, that it is not a crafted burger, but guess what? Everybody eats them, Right. Oh, no, right. It's always, that paradox has always just kind of interested me, just because the public, just the public ridicule, but you still eat the burger anyway, and you still like the burger, even if you don't want to admit that you like the burger.
Exactly. And I noticed that, looking back on the history of TV and this type of TV in particular, I noticed that the anti-game show sentiment among critics seems to increase with the number of game shows that are on the air. I think about the late 60s, early 70s, and when I think about critics shitting on game shows, I think about that era. I think about them calling Let's Make a Deal the downfall of civilization. I think about them calling things like The Money Maze, don't watch this show without a stiff drink in your hand, one review of it said. Like, there were just there were just all these terrible things that they were saying about these, like, light and fluffy shows, but there were also dozens of them on the air. And I compare it in my head as I'm thinking about it to the number of court shows that are on today.
Yes.
Now, the formats are more or less the same, but who's not to say that there's a pocket of TV fans over here in some other corner of the universe that's saying, we love these shows. We love the different personalities that these judges bring to these shows. We love that they're introducing the legal system to people that might not understand it otherwise. They do it in a palatable and colorful way. They're there all the time. We watch them for comfort, for entertainment. We get emotionally invested. I mean, it's all the same reasons that we like the stuff that we like.
Exactly. And the court shows honestly are legal game shows.
Sure.
They're game shows for the law. The People's Court was developed by Ralph Edwards, who also developed game shows.
Yeah,
sure.
Sure.
So when you're watching a court television show, it's shares a lot of those same parallels. There's a referee, like a host. There are two teams or two players who are competing against one another. Somebody wins at the end, somebody loses. And there are 10,000 episodes out there, so they're pretty disposable to the general public. Court shows are game shows with what is the God, I just lost it.
Right, with like a legal dressing, like
they've got a legal dressing,
right? Like a skin, like a courtroom skin on them.
Correct. They've got the wooden walls and the gavel, but
well, I would even take it to the next level and say that there are prizes as well. A lot of people don't realize that on those court shows. So, okay, I'm going to tell you a quick story. Yeah. So I worked with a kid at the hotel. This is about 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. We loved Kanye West. Loved Kanye. Massive fans, and I've always been a massive fan. And right now we're not talking, and I won't get into that, but I'm not on that wagon right now. I really, really, really was back then. We bought tickets to see him in Philly, and it was around the time that Kim Kardashian had gotten robbed. The house had gotten robbed, and she got tied up or something, and he had canceled the rest of his tour. So they were issuing refunds for all these tickets. They were expensive tickets. I think we paid like $300 or something, and this kid was skipping out on my refund. I knew I had given him the money. He paid for them, so he was going to stay up until midnight, or as soon as the tickets dropped, he was going to get on there. So I gave him the money to tell him to go buy the tickets. So I didn't get my half of the money. So I, after about a month, I filed a small claims thing here in Pennsylvania, and it was not a day after I filed it that he came with my money. So I said, okay, never mind. So I withdrew the thing. A week later, I got a FedEx envelope from the producers of Judge Judy. What they do is they go through, I guess they must go through the dockets, which I guess to a certain degree are like public information. They look for these small claims cases, and they send out these letters, and they say, hey, if you want to withdraw your small claims case and agree to have it arbitrated on our show, we will fly you to California and we'll give you $5,000. Whatever you sue for comes out. We'll give you, so they give you both, the plaintiff and defendant, they give them both $5,000 as an appearance fee, quote unquote appearance fee.
What?
If I'm suing him for, let's say, $1,000 and I win, I leave with $6,000, he leaves with $4,000. It comes out of his $5,000.
Wow.
Isn't that insane?
I knew that those were paid out of a different fund. Like once you went on the show, if you lose your court case, you're not paying the other person $1,000. I did not know that. So it's basically a win-win if you take your claim to Judge Judy.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. We were almost going to. And I showed him the letter. I said, I know you gave me the money, but we should pretend to be angry and do this. Yes. And he didn't want to because he wasn't into the. Some people are not into TV like that, which is fine. So we didn't do it, but
I'm into $4,700 though.
Oh yeah, and a free trip to California. They fly you there. That
was wild.
Yeah. So court shows are damn game shows. They give you you win money, and you could leave with more or leave with less. Yeah, for sure.
My goodness, that is incredibly cool.
Isn't it?
That's one of those details about television that, it's Obviously it's not something that they divulge to the general public, but it's one of those cool little things to know. I don't know. It's yeah. My goodness.
Talking about TV and the type of TV that we've been watching, because I noticed that if I think about my viewing habits lately, a lot of it has been sort of for comfort or background sound.
Yeah.
I have been watching a ton of game shows, but one that I do watch, I could watch anytime, is Match Game. I love Match Game. I love everything about it. That is the comfiest, coziest, most fun game show. I love Match Game. At the same time, and I wonder if you have this insight into it as well, assuming that you like Match Game. Are you a Match Game guy?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel like you know too much about Match Game to enjoy it the same way that you used to be able to enjoy it?
Sometimes. Sometimes.
Like the later episodes, now that I know about all the backstage drama, like with Richard Dawson when he started hosting Family Feud and he didn't want to talk anymore and he put dark sunglasses on, his ego was hurt because they brought a wheel in and he left without saying goodbye. And something about all of that drama, like I can't watch the show from like 76 to 78 without. Yeah, it's right. It's awkward because I know too much. I know what's going on. I know what's happening when the camera goes off, and it does affect my enjoyment of it to a certain degree.
No, I totally agree. You can see how it affects the vibe of the entire panel as well because Richard was so well loved and because he was such an integral part of that panel. You can sometimes see it on other television shows when you have the overpaid star, somebody who only shows up once a week when they should be showing up 3 times a week. Actually, on the same note, so one of my favorite shows growing up was Three's Company.
Okay.
I don't know if you know about what happened with Suzanne Summers on that show, but
no, tell me. I don't think I do know.
Okay, so the show became this big hit, and Suzanne Summers, I think it was her husband who was her manager, was at some point he demanded that she receive this big increase. He basically wanted her to become the second Farrah Fawcett, like the second coming of Farrah Fawcett. And at some point, the show's producers said, no, we're tired of this drama where she's not showing up to work on time. We're tired of you trying to ring us for more money. And so they started writing her off the show. And so there's a period of episodes on Three's Company during Suzanne Summers' last season where she is off visiting her grandmother and they do a split screen of like Jack or Janet like talking to Chrissy on the phone where she's on set responding to those lines, but like the cast has been gone for hours. They literally just do like these B-roll like shoots of her saying like, hey Jack, yeah, grandma's okay, talk to you later, bye. And then that's it. That's the only time that she's actually in the show until they officially like write her out of the show completely. It is, once I knew that about those episodes, they were so much more awkward to watch because these people are over here acting, with their phone, and like Chrissy's over here on a dark stage, like doing like 3 lines, and as soon as she hangs up, they're like, "Okay, go home. We're done with you today."
Oh, I'm fascinated with how bad that is.
That it is. It's awkward. It's awkward in the same way like the Richard Dawson stuff was, because you're so used to this dynamic of these people who've worked together for years suddenly be torn apart. And so now they have to have this sort of awkward interaction with one another that isn't real.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's more difficult on a show like Match Game because it isn't it's not a scripted series. Like this thing you're describing with Three's Company sounds terrible, but at the end of the day they can hopefully theoretically act their way through it. On Match Game, these are all people being people. And so sometimes they do talk about their stressors. Sometimes they do talk about why they're not smiling. They do talk about what they've been drinking. And so it is like, watching Match Game is like watching a party. And watching Match Game from like 76 to 78, around the time that Richard Dawson kind of became disillusioned with the whole thing and spread that all around him.
Yes.
It's like watching a party just go wrong.
The ex-boyfriend showed up to the party, so now all the fun just stops because we have to be awkward around him.
Right. One of the pieces of footage that I would kill for, and I don't even know if it exists, the first episode after Richard Dawson leaves. So first of all, his last episode, he holds up a card during the intro that says fare thee well. Like, he knows he's out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Friday. Monday, Bob Barker is in his seat. There is a section of Gene Rayburn's intro after he comes through the door. He thanks Bob Barker for being in the seat. There is an edit there, and he must have explained why Richard Dawson isn't there.
Oh, no.
He must have said something because, so you get this, so you get the intro, he walks through the door, and he says, hi to the celebrities, quick cut, and he says, and we're glad to have Bob Barker sitting in the seat instead, and everybody gives him a round of applause. It's just like such a clear edit. And then after he says that, Bob Barker points down to where he's sitting and says, Gene, why does it say here, the sun never sets on the British Empire? And Gene says, he thought he'd be here forever.
Oh my God.
Isn't that great?
Oh my God.
It's like so juicy. Like, I just want to know what was in there. I'm sure it is long gone.
For sure.
It was immaterial to anyone back then, and nobody thought 45 years later there'd be two people talking on a computer about it. But I would love to know how they explain that away.
Well, to be fair, remember, there were all those, like, not a lot of them, but every now and again, you've seen like the rap party sort of videos that have popped up for some game shows where they either play the game in a more raunchy way, or they just do a bunch of stuff where they've clearly been drinking. I would have to think that would have ended up on one of those rap party end of the season tapes, because my goodness.
Have you seen a ton of those like rap parties from different game shows where they like put all the
seen a few. I've seen a few, but they're so few and far between because, number one, I mean, there was only a certain amount of time in which you could have those parties and get away with it.
Right.
But I think I might have seen like 3 or 4 of those, but I've got to think that there are more around that I just haven't seen.
Oh, there has to be. The one from the rap party for High Rollers with Wake Martindale comes to mind.
Yes.
Oh my God. Have you seen that?
I have seen that one.
Oh my God. I've seen it. I've seen it more than I've seen the Jungle Book. The High Rollers rap party video is my Jungle Book.
It's one of those things where you think you know a person.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And anytime I see Wink Martindale on YouTube, I know what you're up to. You don't fool me.
My favorite though, what I would kill for is I would kill for the entire Phone Jeopardy shoot. That's one that because we've seen we've seen clips and they're on YouTube, of Alex clearly not being very enthused about the idea of playing Jeopardy on your phone once a day for whatever it was, $4.95 a minute. I would kill, because I mean that had to have been at least a couple hours, and so if that tape showed up, that would be like my holy grail of unofficial like footage.
Oh, that would be incredible. Now that we're talking about this, you know what I have to do, right? I have to ask my buddy Chuck Donegan, researcher for Tell Us About Yourself, if I can put just like a little bit of audio from the High Rollers tape in here.
Oh,
I gotta ask him permission. I'm gonna ask him permission, and I'll tell you what, if he says yes, it will start playing right now.
Let's see some brand new prizes. In column 1, what do we have? Dean.
Wink, it's a wheelo and set of condoms. From the show that never spares any expense, this lovely wheelo will provide hours of enjoyment for you and your family. And speaking of enjoyment, how about some condoms? Yes, you and your family will love making with these custom-fitted condoms. You can use them on this absurd segue to war-torn South America.
Well, that was the High Rollers tape. I hope you enjoyed that bit of audio. They'll never let us play that again. Wasn't that great?
Oh, so I've got to ask you, are you excited about any of the new season stuff that's coming up?
I am really excited for Wheel of Fortune. host changes in that old style don't happen very often anymore. The last big one was Bob Barker, Drew Carey, and that was like the Vietnam War of game shows. That was so fractured and so just it was toxic to a certain degree, and controversial. And this, I'm excited to see somebody host Wheel of Fortune that's not Pat Sajak. That doesn't happen very often.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited to see. And also, it seems like they're leaning more into what I think is a rich history. Wheel of Fortune has been on in its current form for like 4 decades. And so to see them harken back to some of the old set designs, to see that, and this is not a recent change within the last couple of years, they went back to the old melody for the theme song. Like, as much as I am not a huge stickler for the small details, I like stuff like that. And we're in this era where, we're in the era of Press Your Luck on ABC, where they're taking care of new shows and treating them with respect, but also respecting the old one in the process. And as a result, we get these cool, if they had shown us what Press Your Luck would look like in 2024 back in 2004, our jaws would be on the floor even to this day.
Yes.
So I'm excited for Wheel of Fortune in particular, I would say, just because I love what I've seen of the set. I love what I've seen of Ryan. I think Ryan is a fantastic choice. There is not another broadcaster on TV that has earned their stripes the way that he has, and what you described about his ability to host live TV speaks to that. He did that. Oh my God, remember the 1,000,000-second quiz?
Yes.
He hosted that damn thing.
That show was one that I thought was just a little ahead of its time. Because
very much so.
If you drop that show in during the height of like HQ trivia, my God, that is a ratings monster. It was just too early.
Oh, for sure. And I think that even if HQ had come first, 1,000,000-second quiz would have had some infrastructure to piggyback on, because they tried to do the mobile quiz. We should explain what this show was, because if you blink, you missed it. It was on for literally 1,000,000 seconds in the 2000s, and that was it. But it was one-on-one trivia, right? There were these small, like, multiple choice competitions, and the game went on for 1,000,000 seconds, and whoever beat the most players was in a big chair, and they would amass a bunch of money, and you tried to beat them, and if you beat them, you took the chair. And I was there. I went to New York to quote unquote be on the show, and I used a PlayStation 2 controller, and Mandel Elegant was the quiz master, and I got beat at 2:00 in the morning in an abandoned car dealership in Manhattan.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
an abandoned car dealership.
So the entire show took place in what was an abandoned, I want to say it was a Camaro dealership in Midtown Manhattan. They had a massive LED hourglass that was built on the rooftop. Yeah. And that's like where, as far as TV was concerned, that's where the show took place. Okay. If you look inside the building, it was a line of hundreds, if not thousands of people waiting to play this game. Remember Buzz, the trivia game for PS2?
Yeah.
Okay, it was those controllers. Imagine those two controllers, right? And 5,000 people in line to play with them.
Wow.
And at the midway point, they built a Subway restaurant.
I remember that.
Yes. So I ate in that Subway. It was all free sandwiches, and it was like lit. It was lit for TV. And I had drank like a Snapple and ate like a turkey sub while I was in line. But it was, in terms of game show experiences, it's the closest, God willing, the closest I've ever felt to poverty.
That sounds like the Eastern European breadline of game shows.
That's exactly what it was. And like what the show was made of, as far as what you saw on TV, you didn't really experience any of that as a contestant. So they take your phone and they put you into like a big tent with a bunch of inflatable couches. I remember there was this one woman who was on College Jeopardy, and don't worry if you don't know, because she'll tell you about it. And she was reading trivia questions from a book to everyone that was like seated around her. And then she got called up to play the game, and 4 hours later she lost. I finally lost at like 2 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, and I got home at like 4 a.m., which is... If you ever want your wife to wonder what you were doing at 4 o'clock in the morning, tell her you were in a giant LED hourglass in New York and you ate a sandwich.
And New York is one of those places where it's just plausible enough to where it sounds like a lie, but it probably isn't. You know, I mean,
right.
It obviously wasn't in your case, but yes.
Yeah, it was. Well, yeah, right. At this point in our relationship, she knew that I probably wasn't making this up. I remember the second episode of Million Second Quiz starting with an apology from Ryan Seacrest for all the technical shit that happened on the first episode.
I remember the app was having technical difficulties at one time, and then the number of people who I remember qualified, because I remember downloading the app on my iPad, and you had to beat a certain amount of people to even be eligible for the show. Like if for every win you got 25 points, like you needed like 1,000 points before they give you the link to where you could, you know, be like the line jumper for that night.
Right, the line jumper, that's what they called it. Yeah, and that was just like you got to just go right in. Yeah, I remember that.
And I remember watching the simulcast at one point when I was up at like midnight, because yeah, to your point, the matches went on for 10 million seconds. Or sorry, not 10 million seconds, because that's the name of the show, the Million Second Quiz.
Right.
But the matches went on for, a million seconds nonstop. So, yeah, I remember you could go to the NBC website and you could actually just watch people play trivia in a bunker at 3 a.m. if that was your idea of a good time.
Yeah, exactly. And then the top 4 people, like, so you had the person in the chair, and they were in the chair. Then you had, I guess, whoever was in second, third, fourth, fifth place. They were sleeping in a capsule hotel on camera. They had 4 like Japanese style like capsule hotel rooms, and that's where they slept. And it was sponsored by Sub. So anyway, I really like Match Game. Good night, America.
It took a couple left turns to get there, but we got back there.
That's right. Yeah, that show was as much fun as it is to describe it. Million-second explanation.
The rules, yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, unbelievable. Jeremy, why did you want to be on this show again? Why did you say yes to me inviting you to talk again to this thing? What did this bring to you?
Because this is fun. Let's be honest. Like, there aren't too many times, where you get to talk about the thing that you nerd out the most to somebody who nerds out about it just as much as you do. For an audience who nerds out about it as much as you do. There are group chats and message boards and all that. And, those are fantastic. Like I said last time, find your people. But this is just fun. And like I've told you, privately, you've also really grown into your own on this show. You've become not that you weren't in the beginning, but you have grown into this fantastic interviewer who asks really, really good questions. And so, I mean, why would you not come back? I'd have to think that there are very few, if any, people who came away from the experience of talking about their love of game shows and their love of being on television and actually being on these game shows and came away thinking, yeah, that was a waste of 90 minutes. This is just fun and you're good at it. And why wouldn't you? I mean, I'd be on every episode and Ed McMahon this for you if you'd let me.
Oh, thank you very much. And I will look into that. That sounds like fun.
I'll just be over the corner of my whiskey. Ha! You are correct, sir.
Yeah. Yes. We just gotta get you some whiskey. Get your own damn bottle, man. This was fun. Tell Us About Yourself. Conversations with Game Show Contestants is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Christian Carrion, from my studio in beautiful downtown Lancaster City, Pennsylvania. Co-executive producer Cory Anotado. Researcher Chuck Donegan. This has been a production of BuzzerBlog, the most popular game show website in the world, in partnership with the National Archives of Game Show History at the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. For more information, visit museumofplay.org. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Christian Carrion. Good night. Tell Us About Yourself is sponsored by bonusround.ca, streaming Canada's classic game shows on demand. Dive into the golden age of television with thousands of episodes of Canadian series that defined an era from anywhere in the world, all for just $1.99 a month. From iconic shows like Let's Make a Deal and Definition to cult classics like Bumper Stumpers and The Mad Dash, bonusround.ca brings you timeless entertainment that's fun, enlightening, and affordable. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, relive the magic of Canadian television history. Subscribe now at bonusround.ca for $1.99 and turn every night into Game Show Night. By Game Show Forensics. Join host Robert McKee and his crack team of forensic game show scientists as they take you on the deepest dives imaginable in a quest to analyze the most detailed minutiae of game shows nobody else dares to, or cares to, investigate. Nothing is too whimsical for examination, no semantics too absurd for the research extremists at GameShowForensics.com. Parental discretion is advised. And by The Inn at Leola Village. Nestled in the heart of picturesque Pennsylvania, the Inn at Leola Village is a sanctuary of luxury and relaxation. Indulge in the timeless beauty of their historic suites, each meticulously designed to transport you to a bygone era of elegance and grace. Experience the culinary delights of their award-winning Italian restaurant, where every dish is a masterpiece crafted from the finest local ingredients. From romantic getaways to corporate retreats, the Inn at Leola Village offers a haven for every occasion. Unwind at the spa, stroll through the lush gardens, and let the stress of everyday life melt away. Make your reservation today at theinnatleolavillage.com or call the front desk at area code 717-656-7002. The Inn at Leola Village, an oasis of luxury.